Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Straight Science. Straight Science is an evening science seminar series put on by UAF Northwest Campus in Nome, and also UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome. This is the home office. Both UAF Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant are public servants of the Bering Strait region. We serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, Yupik, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. So tonight is a big topic for us in the region, and this has to do with two documents or strategies that have come out. One is the 2022. It was written in 2022, the National Strategy for the Arctic Region, and also the Arctic Research Plan for the Arctic. And that takes the science up through 2026. So this is going to be very interesting. And tonight's speaker is Dr. Larry Hinzman. Now, he's still sort of University of Alaska Fairbanks, but we lent him, we meaning the big of Alaska, lent him to the White House. So he's on duty back east. So he's in a completely different time zone. And we thank him for tackling this topic at a very different time zone. It's much later where he is than where we are. So Larry Hinzman is I'm going to have to read this because it's quite wordy. He is the Assistant Director for Polar Sciences at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as well as being the Executive Director of the Interagency Arctic Research Committee. And the one thing that I have to say about Larry Hinzman is when I asked, he's one of the few people that's back in Washington, D.C. that does not find it inconvenient to talk to the Bering Strait region on the Bering Strait region's time zone. And so for that alone, I am grateful that he is willing to talk to us, even though it's so much later where he is. With that, I would say take it away, Larry Hinzman. We really want to learn how this all fits in with the Bering Strait region. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Gay. Thanks to everybody who's joined. I'm just delighted to participate in this discussion tonight. I really appreciate the university hosting this, Sea Grant, everybody who's contributed. So thanks to everybody. I have worked, so I'll give a little bit of background first. So I have worked as a professor at the University of Alaska. I started working at UAF in 1982. So I've been doing research in Alaska for almost, over 40 years now. And I was a research professor. I did mostly work with hydrology. I had a lot of weather stations and stream gauging stations on the Seward Peninsula. So I've worked up in the Kegluiks. I had stations out near Council. I worked up near Cougarok. And so it's really a joy for me to engage with the people of the Seward Peninsula. And so my heart is very much there. It's one of my favorite parts of Alaska. And the Bering Strait region is so important right now. It's getting so much attention from the nation, from the world. And so there's a lot of interest and a lot of activity. I am working for the White House now. About 3 years ago, they asked me to come back and help write the nation's Arctic Research Plan, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm also we're writing this plan to address the challenges and the problems and the needs of the people in Alaska. So I hope you'll look at the plan. I'll give you a link for that, and you'll see the work that we're doing. And I think you'll see that it does provide a lot of benefits to the people in Alaska and the Arctic. So there's been a tremendous amount of change that has occurred in the Arctic and for Alaskans, and particularly for those in the Bering Strait region. As you all know, the climate is changing. We're losing sea ice. We're eroding coastlines. The permafrost is thawing, and those have implications to food security. So it really has direct impacts on the people in the region. And there's also, as you all know, this crazy changing geopolitical situation, which adds induced stress and concern to what we need to address and the urgency of it. So it's important, it's vitally important the federal government supports the Arctic and it helps the Arctic and the people there be resilient to the climate crises and supports sustainable economic development in Alaska and in the Arctic. And so this evening, I'll be providing an overview of 2 key strategies for federal investment in the Arctic. Oh, I wanted to say before I started, it's wonderful to see. I see a lot of familiar names on the Zoom meeting, and it's just wonderful to see all my old friends there. And so I'm just, I can't say how happy it is. Just makes my heart soar to see your name here and see your engagement. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the national strategy for the Arctic. And so this document provides the overall vision for the U.S. support of the Arctic, and it includes providing for homeland security and defense, mitigating and building resilience to climate change, and also for ecosystems degradation. And it's also focused on expanding U.S. economic opportunities and protecting and improving livelihoods, including the indigenous communities, remote communities. And while we are also interested in upholding international laws and rules and norms and standards across the Arctic countries. And you'll see this if you look at the National Strategy for the Arctic region, you'll see all that in there. The second document I'm going to talk about is the Arctic Research Plan. And that's why the White House hired me. They wanted me to lead the development of this plan. And this is a high-level strategy that is addressing emerging research questions about the Arctic over the next 5 years. And it provides specific research goals and deliverables that are going to be achieved by the federal government and our partners in the next 2 years. So actually, yeah, so we're in the right place.
So do you want, this is Gay, sorry, Larry. Do you just let me know when you want the next slide?
No, you're okay, you're in the right place. That's what I'm talking about now. So the Arctic is home to more than 4 million people, and it's got extensive natural resources and unique ecosystems, but it's undergoing really a dramatic transformations. And this is driven by climate change. This transformation will affect and challenge livelihoods in the Arctic, but it will also create new economic opportunities and could intensify strategic competition among countries. And so there's also this geopolitical forces and this global economy that's behind all this too. And so it's a much more complicated question and issue than one might first think. And so that's why we're investing so much effort in it. That's why we're having such a large workforce involved in this effort. So the United States is an Arctic nation. Because of Alaska, we are an Arctic nation. And that gives us the authority and the responsibility for the stewardship and the protection of this region, especially during this period of change. We recognize the region's increasing strategic importance to the United States. And that's why we decided to update there was a national strategy for the Arctic region, which was published in 2013. And so this is a relatively quick turnaround to create a new strategy, but we need to reflect the changing strategic environment and this administration's priorities. So the Biden-Harris administration is very interested in the Arctic, which is a good thing, as you'll see from all the investments that we're seeing. The United States, this is consistent across the last 50 years, our policy towards the Arctic. The United States wants to see an Arctic region that is stable, peaceful, prosperous, and cooperative. So the national strategy for the Arctic region really defines that affirmative, that positive US agenda over the next 10 years and to realize that vision. And so this strategy is intended to serve as a framework to guide our government's approach to tackling emerging challenges and opportunities in the Arctic. And our work is guided by 5 principles that will be applied across all 4 pillars. And I'm going to go through those, but the 5 principles are consultation, coordination, and co-management with Alaska Native tribes and communities, a deepening of relationships with allies and partners, planning for long lead time investments, and development of cross-sectoral coalitions and innovative ideas. And finally, a commitment to a whole of government evidence-based approach. So, Gay, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks for doing that, by the way. So there's 4 pillars that I'm going to talk about, and in the NSAR. And the first one is to realize our vision that during this dynamic and challenging period will require U.S. leadership at home and abroad. And we'll advance the U.S. interest across these mutually reinforcing pillars that span domestic and international issues. So the first pillar, pillar 1, is security. And we will deter threats to the U.S. homeland and our allies by enhancing the capabilities required to defend our interests in the Arctic, while coordinating shared approaches with allies and partners and mitigating risks of unintended escalation. And we will exercise U.S. government presence in the Arctic region as required to protect the American people and defend our sovereign territory. So that is very similar to what was in the previous NSAR, but it's been a consistent U.S. policy. But again, it's re-articulated here. Can you go to pillar 2, please? Okay. Next slide. So pillar 2 is climate change and environmental protection. So the U.S. government will partner with Alaskan communities and with the state of Alaska to build resilience to the impacts of climate change. And we're working to reduce emissions from the Arctic as part of the broader global mitigation efforts, while we're also trying to improve our scientific understanding and conserve Arctic ecosystems. Next slide, please. So pillar 3 is sustainable economic development. And we all understand how our communities, our rural communities, need this. And so this is something where we plan to pursue sustainable development and improve livelihoods in Alaska. Again, including Alaska Native communities. And by investing in infrastructure and improving access to services and supporting the growing economic sectors. And we also will work with our allies and partners to expand high standard investments in sustainable development across the Arctic region. And I'm sure you're all aware of the infrastructure money that's coming to Alaska. We're investing in broadband. We're investing in infrastructure. We're trying to develop the port in Nome. We're doing a lot that hopefully will help Alaskans. Next slide, please. So the 4th pillar is international cooperation and governance. So, despite the challenges to Arctic cooperation resulting from Russia's war in the Ukraine, the United States is going to work to sustain the institutions for Arctic cooperation, including the Arctic Council. And we will position these institutions to manage the impacts of this increasing activity in the region. So we're really heavily focused on collaborating with our allies and also influencing the behavior of the Russians. Let's go to the next slide, please. So we also have several cross-cutting principles. And the strategy is intended to serve as a framework to guide the US government's approach to tackling these emerging challenges and opportunities in the Arctic. And our work will be guided by these 5 principles that are applied across all 4 pillars. So the first one is to consult and coordinate and co-manage with Alaska Native tribes and communities. The United States is committed to regular, meaningful, and robust consultation, coordination, and co-management with Alaska Native tribes, communities, and corporations, and other organizations, and to equitable inclusion of Indigenous people and their knowledge. And I'm sincere in this approach, and so is our government. So this is it's an important principle for us. We need to deepen relationships with our allies and our partners, and we will deepen our cooperation with Arctic allies and partners such as Canada, the Kingdom of Denmark, which includes Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. And we're also going to expand Arctic cooperation with other countries that uphold international laws, rules, and standards in the Arctic. We need to plan for long lead time investments. Many of these investments are prioritized in the strategy will require long lead times, such as that port in Nome. It's going to be a big effort to build that. But we will be proactive in anticipating changes coming to the Arctic over the next several decades and making new investments now to be prepared. Finally, we are going to cultivate cross-sectoral coalitions and innovation ideas. The challenges and opportunities in the Arctic cannot be solved by national governments alone. The United States will strengthen and build on the coalitions of the private sector. We'll use academics, the civil society and state. We'll use local and tribal actors, and to encourage and harness these innovative ideas and to tackle these challenges. So everybody's got to play a role here. And finally, we are committed to a whole of government evidence-based approach. And so we are working with 18 federal agencies who are strongly involved in the Arctic, and we're pulling all those collaborations together to eliminate duplication and get good coordination among these agencies so that we can achieve as much as possible. The Arctic extends beyond the responsibility of any single region or a government agency, so that US federal departments and agencies are working together to implement this strategy. And we're going to deploy evidence-based decision-making and carry out our work in close partnerships with the state of Alaska, with Alaska Native tribes and communities and corporations and other organizations and individuals in the Arctic. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, here we go. Let's see, where are we at? I should be on slide 8. I think we're going backwards.
Yeah, sorry about that. Stand by 1.
Should be on slide 8.
I think there you go. That's slide 8.
Okay, so we are already advancing the key components of the strategy. So President Biden has reactivated the Arctic Executive Steering Committee last year to coordinate this whole of government actions in the Arctic. And the Arctic Executive Steering Committee is already helping implement these pillars for this 2022 strategy and enhancing coordination of federal Arctic policies to meet these needs of Americans living in the Arctic and to advance US interest throughout the circumpolar Arctic. The Army Corps of Engineers has committed $250 million to the development of the Port of Nome and its infrastructure, and through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act work plan. So we're really pleased to see that. Some of Alaska's most underserved communities are also going to receive high-speed internet access for the first time as a result of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant Program. And to date, Alaska Native entities have received more than $125 million in grants for broadband adoption and infrastructure deployment, which is just wonderful. I understand, the frustrations people have felt over the years, and hopefully we'll get this with the port connectivity, but hopefully we'll get that resolved soon. So to advance American leadership and cooperation with our allies and partners in the Arctic, the United States is establishing an ambassador at large for the Arctic region to carry out US policy in the Arctic and engage with counterparts in the Arctic and non-Arctic nations. The US is one of the few Arctic nations that doesn't have an ambassador to the Arctic, and we still hasn't been named, but that's something we're all looking forward to, and it's I hope they move to that, complete that soon. The US Coast Guard continues efforts to improve and expand the nation's polar ice breaking fleet, which is vital to protecting US sovereignty and to protecting our national security and economic and environmental interests in the polar regions. I'm a little dismayed with the progress that we're making in seeing new icebreakers, but hopefully that will move forward. We set out to make this an inclusive policy, and the development process. We engaged with a wide set of external stakeholders, especially in Alaska, and with our Arctic allies and partners to ensure that their perspectives are reflected in the strategy. So we did consult with Alaska Native tribes, corporations, communities, and other organizations. We talked to the state of Alaska through the Office of the Governor and through the commissioners. We met with the Alaska congressional delegation, and we also met with Alaska municipal and bureau leaders. We met with Arctic allies and from other countries, and we're already establishing collaborative relationships on issues of high priority. And we've held a series of roundtable discussions with businesses, with society groups, civil society groups, and academic institutions. So more than 30 government agencies were involved in the development of this strategy, representing the a whole of government approach. So that's all I'm going to talk about on the NSAR for now, but we can come back if there's questions if you want to know more about it. But let's go to the next slide, please. So now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about the Arctic Research Plan. And so this is what the White House hired me to lead development of. But again, this was a huge effort that involved 18 federal agencies and 3,500 researchers from across the nation. So this is a huge effort to decide what we want to do over the next 5 years. So the National Strategy for the Arctic, the NSAR, focuses on the federal government's approach to Arctic policy. And a second strategy, which focuses specifically on the role of research and science. So this is where we come in. We are the boots on the ground. And the Arctic Research Plan was released last December. I'm sorry, the Arctic Research Plan was actually released in 2021. And then the implementation plan. So the Arctic Research Plan is the gray one on the left. And I'm showing the covers for the Arctic Research Plan. And the white one on the right is the implementation plan. So we just released that in November of last year. So they're both relatively new, but they are already being implemented and being guided. So this is a federal plan, but we can't hope to accomplish all the goals and objectives of the plan without the residents of the Arctic. And we hope you will participate in this implementation. And I'm going to highlight some of the ways you can get involved later on in this presentation. So the Arctic Research Plan and that implementation plan focus on 4 priority areas. And those priority areas are community resilience and health, Arctic system interactions, sustainable economies and livelihoods, and risk management and hazard mitigation. The previous plan and the previous plans, the previous Arctic research plans that were for the US federal government were primarily focused on environmental processes, physical processes, biological processes. And this new plan shifts to address social issues that require a more complex and multidisciplinary approach. So in this plan, we're trying to take on the challenges that you read about every day in the newspaper. So we're trying to resolve the challenges that people live with and trying to make the life in the Arctic more sustainable, more resilient, more livable. Let's go to the next slide, please, Gay. So each of these priority areas under this plan has a specific goal, and under each goal there are objectives, which are the research actions that advance these goals. So there are a total of 21 objectives in the implementation plan. And then each objective identifies deliverables, and these are specific products, research products that will be achieved in the next 2 years. So we're going to complete these deliverables. We're going to complete these products in the next 2 years of this implementation. And they're centered on supporting research, for example, initiating funded projects with local partners and creating products, which could be reports or synthesis or tools or models, and coordinating information sharing, through works or workshops or team meetings. But now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to highlight some of the specific deliverables that are particularly relevant to the residents of the Bering Strait region. Gay, would you go to the next slide, please? So this is the first priority area, community resilience and health. And this priority area provides a number of research goals relevant to the Bering Strait. So one, it calls for research on COVID-19 prevention and lessons learned for future pandemic preparedness. And so this is good for all of our nation, but we think it's definitely necessary in the Arctic. It also calls us to better understand human illnesses that are associated with harmful algal blooms. Gay and I were talking about this prior to before we started and how important that is. So the previous Arctic Research Plan did a lot of work on harmful algal blooms, and we're going to continue that work. And so it also looks at the impacts of those harmful algal blooms on traditional and commercial foods. This plan also calls for research on seabird and marine mammal mortality events in the Bering Sea, and to understand how these and other changes may impact food security. And in this plan, this deliverables also calls for maps out areas of risk for coastal erosion, permafrost thaw, and flooding. And so there are many more deliverables in there, but I'm not going to go through them all on this. But I encourage you to look at this plan. So let's go to the second priority area, Arctic system interactions. Oh, Dean, I see your hand is up. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I would. And I've worked on many aspects of the Arctic, dealing with military, dealing with science, understanding the biology of what's happening in the region. And I know a lot of the economic issues kind of are the driving forces behind what pushes the government into what they support. But one thing I see is subsistence and food security support is initially very important to the region. And to me, health support in this slide here, you focus on harmful algal blooms, and I study those. I was up in the Bering Sea when we had this massive bloom this year. But what I would like to see for the region is support for immediate and a local assessment of food items that any of the health corporations up there could do. And I would like you to help focus those people on how to get support to establish, say, a sampling lab in the region. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think you're doing a great job here. But I'd just like to say, I think it's very important that they have real-time information on harmful algal blooms themselves, whether it's supporting the Norton Health Corporation or any of the other areas in the region.
I think that's a great idea. So Dean, you know me. Why don't you go ahead and shoot me, put that into a paragraph and shoot me a note. Do you mind?
I'll get your email from Gay. Sure.
Sure, that'd be great. Yep.
Yep. Thank you much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no worries. No worries. So Gay, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Arctic system interactions. So this is the second priority area. And what this means, so this Arctic system interactions, this has been where so much of the research has been, the US research has been focused on for the last several decades, and it's really important. And all of this information that's been done over the last several decades has led us to the point where we can take on these more complex issues right now, but there's still so much needs to be done. So what we're talking about here is we want to understand, how the components of the ecosystem, the Arctic system interact. So how the circulation of the ocean affects the sea ice dynamics, how the presence or absence of sea ice affects coastal erosion, how that coastal erosion interacts with permafrost. And so working with all these components together to try and understand and project how the Arctic is changing and how it's likely to change in the future. But also, this is really important as far as the Arctic plays a huge important role in the global climate dynamics. And so we really need to address that too. So some of the deliverables that we're looking at here are, we want to track and understand the distribution, abundance, biodiversity, and health of the marine species. I see Jackie's on the call. Jackie's played a big role in this over the years. So we've got some great collaborators involved in this. And so Jackie's also one of our team leaders. We want to understand how marine species and ocean and ice conditions and climate change are all connected. That's a huge challenge, but I think we're getting to the point where we can really make some progress here. We also want to understand the threats from coastal invasive species and wildlife diseases. And again, I encourage you to look back at the implementation plan, because there's so many other deliverables that we're going to accomplish in the next 2 years. But I don't have time to go through all this right now. So let's go to the next slide, please, Gay. So this one is really important, I think, for for the Bering Strait region is sustainable economies and livelihoods. We really are sincerely interested in making life better for the people of the Arctic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create an asset map of existing infrastructure so we can provide a baseline understanding of what communities need to be resilient to climate impacts. We also are going to do research to understand what factors affect job availability and wages in the major economic sectors. And we're also trying to develop models that help us predict how fishery species will respond to the changes happening in the Bering Sea. That's a tremendous challenge, but hugely important. And I don't know how we're not going to get that in the next 2 years, but we won't ever get there if we don't try and tackle it. So that's something that's really important to all of us. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Risk management and hazard mitigation. So in this priority area, what we're looking at is we're going to identify the top 10 threats and hazards to be included in the statewide threat assessment. We're also going to create models and analysis to understand where natural and human-made threats and hazards pose a risk to Arctic communities. We're also going to conduct a study focused on cold regions infrastructure and create a report that provides an overview of the technologies and the best practices. So hopefully we'll make some good progress there. So those are the 4 priority areas, but there's also 5 foundational activities. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. So the foundational activities, these are activities that are just basic to research, that are important for all research activities. And so these foundational activities cross all of the research efforts that we've put forward. So they are data management, education, training, capacity building, monitoring, observing, and modeling, and prediction, participatory research, and Indigenous leadership in research, and technology innovations and applications. So those are the key foundational activities that we are establishing and we're going to maintain for the coming future. But these foundational activities call for a number of activities that are relevant to those living in the Bering Strait region. So they ensure that Arctic residents and Indigenous organizations are involved in conversations around Arctic data management. We're improving access to STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we're improving access to STEM internships, and we're trying to develop skill development opportunities and career pathways, in particular for rural and Indigenous students, or communities, Indigenous communities. We're also sharing information about field research activities to Alaska communities where research is being conducted. And we are creating a toolkit for scientists to be better prepared for consultation and participatory research. So that means engaging the communities in the research and working with Indigenous communities and utilizing Indigenous knowledge. So I want to talk now. Let's go to the next slide, please, Gay. I'm almost done here. I just want to talk for a little bit about getting involved. And so we hope that you will enjoy us to implement this plan. And while this is a federal plan, it truly can't be accomplished without the support and the efforts of the broader Arctic research community and the Arctic communities. So we hope you feel that these deliverables of this plan are relevant to you and respond to your needs. The Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, which created and administers this plan, runs a website called Arctic Collaborations. And this site is a hub for sharing information and coordinating efforts. And if you aren't a member, we hope you'll sign up and apply for an account at arcticcollaborations.org. So let's go to the final slide for maybe questions and comments for discussion. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Larry. And now is the time for me to say, put a little love in the chat box for Larry Hinzman. It's never easy to be a public speaker, much less a straight science speaker when the slides come at you at a different time than they're supposed to. Thank you for that. And show a little love for Larry Hinzman, and we'll have questions. And I'm going to unmute callers because I think some of them might have gotten automatically muted on the way in here. And we'll check with callers first. So if you're able to unmute, if you're a caller, I'm going to go ahead and unmute at this end to make sure people are not stuck. Then we'll see if the callers had any questions first. If there's trouble getting to or getting unmuted, because this has happened before, you can always text my cell phone with your question. Go ahead. Is there a question from any
Hello,
caller?
no, I'll take it a question. Yeah, this is Lucy and Gamble. I think you might have heard me clearing my throat. I don't know.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
My question is in any of the planning, I didn't hear mentioned the traffic that we're experiencing in this region with that corridor, with the other nations traveling in this marine corridor, and how it's impacting our subsistence way of life, and the traffic and noise and pollution, the animal or marine mammal routes shift and change,
That's
and impacting
yeah, please go ahead.
food security.
That is a very important question. And actually, so one of our IARPC, the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, one of our member agencies is the Coast Guard. We also have strong engagement with the State Department and also with the Department of Defense. And so this is an issue that comes up a lot. There's great concern because, you know, all of the increased traffic you're talking about also brings an increased risk of potential oil spills or vessel conflicts, and also with the engagement interactions with wildlife. And so it's a big concern. It's also an international waterway, and so that makes it, you know, how much control makes it a challenge. And so, you know, I don't have a good solution to you. I know that the State Department is very concerned about that. I know that they are having high level discussions about it, but, you know, I don't know what control we have, particularly at this point with the, you know, most of that traffic obviously is coming out of Russia with their transport. And I don't know how much control we have in at this time. So I don't know, I welcome suggestions on what you think we could do and should do, and I would gladly pass them on to the State Department or to the Coast Guard.
Lucy, this is Gay. Do you have any specific ideas? I kind of think you sort of brought one up right there in the beginning of your question regarding planning, but do you have any thoughts on how you would like to see things progress if they talk about ship traffic, industrial ship traffic?
Yes, I voiced this because it's a huge concern and I want it on the table. And the other thing is possibly making sure that the Indigenous voice is at the table when decisions are made at these higher level discussions, because it impacts us directly.
Absolutely.
With the way we are living and our food sovereignty. So the Native voice needs to be at the table when decisions are made. I think that would be one of the key things to advocate for.
Absolutely. So our office, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, actually with the CQ, another office in the Executive Office of the President, developed a new federal guidance for engagement, guidance for federal agencies on incorporating Indigenous knowledge and working with Indigenous communities. And it is very clearly stated there that the Indigenous voice must be heard in these policy decisions. So I think that is a real shift in our federal policy. And I hope that you do see more appropriate engagement and do see a positive change in the coming years. So that is something that the Biden administration is really focused on, and I'd be glad to share that that federal guidance, that guidance that's gone out to federal agencies directing how they must engage communities.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, who better than
This is
to-
Cheryl from Trumbull. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Cheryl.
I have a concern, and I was late in signing in for getting through. My concern is about, and I'm not sure if this is where to voice my concern, but you mentioned, when I got on, you mentioned and such. I don't know if you were aware that we had 2 Russians defect. I don't even know if that's the correct word. They got here by boat, and if anything else is in place or is going to be done if other Russians try to run away from Russia to come over here, or up further north. It had been a concern, and Homeland Security came and picked up those 2 individuals. They're drafting more and more young people over there, younger people as well. So, we might see more people try to run away from over there to try to get away from this war. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. That's not something that we can do with on a research aspect, but I'd be curious, what do you think we should be doing? It's another immigration issue, essentially, as far as when you haven't faced immigrants coming across our northern borders, but I guess that's could be a greater occurrence in the future. I'd be curious to see what do you think we should do?
Oh, I was just putting it out there.
No clue.
Something to keep in mind. I mean, I guess everybody to keep in mind that this might happen.
Yeah.
And
do you feel threatened because of that?
No, I don't, but some do.
Yeah, this is gay, Cheryl. So speak up if I'm getting this wrong. But personally, I've seen where research crews before the Ukraine, where research cruises, you have people from far away and they like to go to the border, right to the border to drop their buoys because it's kind of fun for them to take a picture of the GPS saying, oh, we're right on the border, or they may be shadowed and have caused a boat. They're so close, they may cause another Russian boat to come, and that makes it even more exciting. And when those guys leave, that makes the border rougher for the residents here. So that's one thing I've seen personally. And the other is when you have something like we have a war going on right across the way here in the neighborhood, and we see some of the repercussions and people fleeing, taking at great risk. And I think people are nervous about, but I think you have in here, there's, like it was something about, you said deter threats to our defense, but don't think that this region doesn't think about the woulda, coulda, what if kind of thing, because we are remote and we get it that we're in the middle of this situation. And even without the current geopolitical pressure, there are things that other people can do in this region because it's a maritime shared boundary that cause problems for regional residents. Thank you.
You're absolutely right.
Cheryl, you got anything on that? Anything to comment on?
No, I don't. I just wanted to take my mind on that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, honestly. There are other callers. Any other callers? Callers get priority.
Yes, it's Robert Sillick of Diamond.
Go ahead.
I do have one question or two. I've heard what's his name, Larry, and you as well, due to the back of communications and stuff being upgraded throughout the region due to this traffic and ongoing that's going on in the Bering Strait and throughout the region, as well as going out through the Arctic Ocean and stuff like that. How well we know and how soon will it be that communications would be improved as we speak now, even since we've had internet and stuff and whatnot. Diamond has we get cut off a lot. Our signal comes from Wales, and if Wales gets cut out, we're off with internet and stuff, phone system communications. And the other question was, I noticed I had a discussion earlier and spoke with people on Facebook, also with Mr. Thurman, Rick, and I've heard and read the illustrations and stuff about weather stations. Diamond here used to have the weather station here, which is not operative anymore at all. And we haven't had any weather stations here at all ever since then. And the thing is, my concern also is, due to, it's good to have weather stations in all points, especially in this region and right across near the international date line and stuff. And due to the fact traffic is going on, it is very vital for us, not only Diamond, and the boats and the vessels and people that hunt amongst this region need to know about this weather station, and so how soon because before then, weather stations come around. All we did, our forefathers and the fathers just look out and look out the weather and tell what it's going to be like today. That's how they would tell the weather would be. They don't plan for tomorrow. They don't plan for the future. They just plan for that day because they see what the weather is going to be like that day. So that was one of the two questions I've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So the two questions are, I think I've got them, is how soon will it be before communications are improved? And the fact that Diamond has to call in to a local Zoom call because they can't, there's no capacity to do a Zoom is a good example of why we're waiting and ask that question. And then the second is, I think, maybe getting more instrumentation like weather stations and things like that, which would be super, super important for this region, especially given the ship traffic. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Did I get it wrong?
But I know you and I and a few of us are concerned, and we've talked about Diamond and weathers and concerned about whatnot and stuff like that. Besides, I spoke with you about a repeater. We thought we'd put one on Fairway Rock, which is an island about southeast, about 9 miles from here. And by BLM, we own that island, so through Bering Land Management. So we mentioned it before. Is that something to do with our international, right next to the international date line? I'm still stoked on that. I know we've had that discussion before about repeaters, besides with the communication.
Thank you, Robert. And I think also other islands in our area have also asked about repeaters, but I can't speak for that directly. But I'll leave it up to Mr. Hinzman, Dr. Hinzman to.
But I can answer part of that question. Maybe then I will actually ask. I see Rick Tobin's on the line, so maybe I'll ask Rick to jump in on the weather station part of it. I guess first, what I'd say is, so improving the internet capabilities of Gamble and Diomede, that's a real high priority, and there is funding out there available for that. And there's the Denali Commission. The Denali Commission out of Anchorage actually will help communities apply for that money. So I encourage you to contact the Denali Commission and talk with them. Somebody from your community should contact them and say, how can we apply for these resources? How can we get this this improved capacity? The money is there, and it's that's what it's intended for. So you should take advantage of it. With respect to the weather stations, boy, I wholeheartedly agree. At one time, I was mentioning I worked on the Seward Peninsula quite a bit. I used to run a weather station on top of Anvil Mountain. I had a weather station on top of Skookum. I had one out in the Kiglix. And I had repeaters that actually connected all that those weather stations together. And they were incredibly effective. We had cameras on there, and so they were really helpful for backcountry travelers, for bush pilots to know what the weather was like in an area, so they could, they fly over the Kiglix, they know what it could be completely different from Nome. And so that information is really valuable. It is really hard to, from a research perspective, to keep those stations going for many years, and so they have to be maintained by an agency that has operational capacity, such as NOAA. So one thing we have done is we've actually written a report that was delivered to Congress here in November about the needs for greater observing capacity, and so we gave those as examples of why we need more observations, continuous and sustained observations, and hopefully we're trying to get agency approval to go forward with the implementation plan that'll actually describe what needs to be done, where, and how much we're going to invest, what it's going to cost, and then get the resources to do that. Rick, I see you're on the line too. Do you want to add anything to that? Do you have a better answer for Robert?
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Larry. So you're certainly absolutely right that, that this is environmental information that's critical like this needs to be delivered by agencies that have operational capacity. On the other hand, I'm gonna stress here that putting in a weather station so that somebody can show a graphic that look at all these dots we have. The Bering Strait region, most of the communities, except for Diomede, have weather stations, and we have multiple stations at any one time that are not reporting. It's not just a matter of installing, they need to be reporting. And that's a communications issue, it's a maintenance issue, that never-ending funding tail that you are well aware of, that has to be part of the equation. It isn't just a matter of sticking a piece of equipment somewhere and calling it good. This long-term commitment has to be part of the plan.
Yep, absolutely right.
And this is Gay. I'm going to also chime in that losing our NOAA's National Weather Service station in Nome doesn't help in that regard, because we don't have anyone here to even go service or collect data. Even if Nome goes down, which it has during Merbach and some other big days, we don't have anyone here to collect the data. So it's awkward. But any other questions? Robert, did that answer everything on your end of things?
Yes, it has. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other callers? Callers get the priority here, and we have quite a bit of callers tonight. And then we'll get to I see some questions in the chat, and probably other people have questions as well. But thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. It is hard to be a caller in this region, calling in on a Zoom. So we appreciate everybody calling in to listen. All right.
One more thing there, Gay.
Go ahead.
One more thing, excuse me, was earlier I just got cut off earlier, so I had to redial it again. So if I do get cut off again, hopefully, if I can call Gay or one of you on this matters and stuff, if I do get cut off, I may not be joined back in though. But if you can give me what you discuss about and what you guys discuss or what I miss or so, just in case though. Can I get back with you on that matter there, Gay?
You bet. Yep.
You bet.
We're gonna make sure you
Okay.
try to stay on.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Until there's another caller, callers can interrupt at any time because that is the thing we do here in the Bering Strait region. If you're a caller, you are high priority. Right now, in the beginning of the chat, I don't see anyone's hands up. So we did have a question right off the bat from Jim Hemsath. And he says, Larry, can you speak to Principle 5, evidence-based approach, as evidence-based management is a very specific management approach, one that fits brilliantly as a research approach and has its roots in participatory action research.
And Jim is correct. And so that is the real push behind our whole of government approach now, as far as we have to utilize, we are directed to use science in establishing the justification for any of our actions going forward. And so the evidence-based work, evidence-based policy making is critically important. And I also appreciate Jim's perspective as an engineering manager, and so as a program manager, he can see that, and he's much more aware of it and tuned with it than I am. But that is something that I'm really pleased to see our federal agencies taking to heart and utilizing this criteria that they must not only use the science in their decision making, but they also have to justify it and they have to prove it. And I think that's critically important. But Jim, do you want to add anything to that?
I do, if you all can hear me. I actually got really excited when I saw that in the White House, because I had just been playing around with that. So I even wrote a research program based on this. There are 4 components to evidence-based management. One is the evidence, the scientific evidence, the research evidence. The other is practitioner experience. The third is the local context. It just can't be science writ large. It's about the local context. And the fourth and the most important is the perspectives of the people that are affected by the decision. There are 4 very distinct aspects of evidence-based management. And the most important is they look for stakeholder input. So it's easy to say, and that was part of the question, because in one other presentation was we're going to do evidence, but evidence-based management or evidence-based decision-making is more than just the evidence. It's the local context, so it's appropriate, and stakeholder input, which in our case are the people of Bering Straits. And that last component's always ignored. So I just kind of wanted to play that game. And this is Jim, the doctor of management. I'm speaking.
Thank you, Jim.
And I will say again that we're really sincerely focused heavily on not just stakeholders, but rights holders, people who have a right to be engaged and contribute and have the insight and the knowledge and the expertise to provide useful, helpful information. So we utilize the inputs from communities as we develop the Arctic Research Plan, and we are relied on the feedback that we got in selecting the deliverables. And again, I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that we followed the correct approach in developing this plan, and that these deliverables will be of value to the people of the Arctic, to the rural residents of Alaska.
All right. Well, thank you. Did that get at it, Jim? Are you good?
You bet.
Okay. Now there was a question also. Let's see if I want to do these in the right order. So Austin Amosic said, thanks, Larry. The Port of Nome blocks as much as 120,000 cubic yards of beach sands each year. And he gives the modification feasibility study and the page number and where you can find that. I am convinced the loss of sands over multiple decades contributed to erosion at Nome River, causing complete loss of native allotments and destructions of camps and homes and severe impacts to our culture and livelihood. Wouldn't that be a new area of erosion study?
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. So the first, Austin is correct. Modifications to the structures, infrastructure along the coast can cause consequences or feedbacks or other impacts downstream, and so that's very highly probable, very likely that did occur. And so, as far as I don't. One thing that one of our priority areas is actually looking at the coastline, all along the coastline, and looking at areas of stability and areas of vulnerability, and trying to understand what is driving those causes everywhere along the coastline. There's been a lot of federal efforts looking at that in recent years. This particular example that you're talking about is in response to actions taken by the Corps of Engineers. And so, I would suggest, I don't know if that's not necessarily a research program, but it sounds like it's a liability issue. And I suggest you take that to the Corps of Engineers and see what their response is. But I think there's also engineering firms that could easily characterize and quantify that. I don't know the source you just quoted there, but it's probably already been done. But look for a resolution with the Corps of Engineers.
All right, Austin gives you a thumbs up.
Oh, thanks,
Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Larry. Now, Rick Toman had also put in the chat box at the time you were discussing the ship traffic, the varied impacts of the increase of marine traffic, even in the absence of accidents, needs to be appreciated, in my opinion.
He's right. There are so many consequences. Increased ship traffic, it produces more soot, it affects the sea ice. He's right.
We're seeing, we've had events with foreign marine debris, where we were sort of awash in Russian trash a little bit more than normal in 2 years ago, still coming in, but it was really quite extraordinary a couple of years ago. And there's a question from the Metcalfs following up on Lucy's question in Gamble. Who is on the new Arctic Oversight Group?
The Arctic Oversight Group. Are you talking about the Arctic Executive Steering Committee? Yeah, I'm not sure about the Arctic Oversight Group. I don't know what that is.
So Metcalfs, if you're listening, is that there's a question from Larry as to which group?
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So, so there are, the Arctic Executive Steering Committee is, I think it's something like 18 federal agencies. So Ambassador David Balton, who many of you probably know, David Balton was the chair of the U.S. Committee for the Arctic Council when the U.S. when the U.S. was the chair of that. He was the lead for that. So he's very well known to the Arctic and very, very effective. So he is the executive director of the Arctic Executive Steering Committee, and this is a federal committee that. So the IARPC, the committee that I run, the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, we are focused on research. We're doing the boots on the ground work to try and understand what needs to be done, get the data for it, to build the tools, guide the federal policy. The Arctic Executive Steering Committee, they're resolving the problems. They're taking getting the money they need to resolve these issues, bringing the solutions home and building things and creating things so that these problems, these challenges are resolved. And that's, again, it's through the collaborations of the federal agencies. I'm sorry, right off the top of my head, I don't exactly know who those federal agencies are, but I'll be glad to send that to you. So I have Vera and your address, and I'll send that information to you.
All right, did that answer it, Metcalf's? Yes, thanks. Okay, zipping around here, multitasking in the home office tonight. Okay, then Jim Hemseth said, thinking about the subsistence fishing and increased marine traffic. Years ago, there was an Alaskan-based general aviation program called Capstone. Ryanair, Lee and Boyjuk were also involved. There was an interplane communication from GPS to know where everyone was in the sky, where there was no air traffic control. A similar use of GPS and transponders might at least improve safety issues in the marine environment, a blending of technology and local input. I'm not sure, Jim, if you're aware of AIS, the Automated Information System, but maybe you're thinking of something different than that.
I wasn't, I'll look it up. It was just really a reaction to
Yeah,
the
no,
discussion
you're right.
there that everyone's worried about the ships and they can't see us. Well, here's something that technology did in general aviation here in Alaska. How do we do the same thing in the Bering Straits?
It is a really good question. And actually, we should have a straight science just dedicated to AIS, I think. But one of the things, if you're sitting right in front of your computer, just go real quick to marinetraffic.com and you'll kind of see where we are with where ships are. Some ships don't have to turn on their automated beacon, but most ships now do. But there's some that don't have to, which makes it, you know, it works. And yet there's always the guys you don't see legitimately or illegally.
And I'll just say thanks, Gay, because I didn't have a good answer for that.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Orland, who I believe is in Gamble, wrote, "Hi, our coastline, our beach was heavily eroded from the Hurricane Merbach, which we had in mid-September. The water is getting much closer to our village. It's getting closer to our village. So we had the ex-typhoon or the hurricane here in mid-September, and it did a really quite extraordinary amount of damage. We came in with like a 10.5-foot storm surge. I don't know if you heard about, I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Must have heard about that back east.
Yeah, it made big news across the nation. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, it really hit the Bering Strait region quite hard. And like Orland says, there's been considerable damage to.
Yeah, and it's really worrisome. Again, Rick Tolman probably knows this better than I do, but the frequency and the severity of storms across the Arctic and across the nation and around the world are getting more intense and more frequent. And so this is a big issue associated with climate change. And so it's something that, we need to better be able to forecast, better be able to prepare for. And it's the coastal erosion all around Alaska is, well, not all around, but in many parts of Alaska is a real issue, is a real challenge for us. And so that's something our villages also need to address, need to consider. And, our federal government is willing to help. We need the information from the communities as far as what you want to do and how to address it. And so again, there is resources to address this, but I would again direct you to the Denali Commission. They have resources for infrastructure development.
Wonderful. There is a question from Megan Gannon with the Nome Nugget news in the region. And she is asking, does the Bering Strait region have the infrastructure to make sure meaningful collaboration and consultations are occurring? For example, I think the North Slope borough and other regions might have people in liaison roles to formally facilitate communication between federal scientists and indigenous communities, but I'm not sure how much capacity Nome has in that area.
I think Nome has tremendous capacity. So we've had wonderful collaborations with Sitnisuk and with Queric, with the Bering Sea Elders groups. And so there's, we take advantage of the resources of the capacities that are there. And so, everybody could always use more. The North Slope is very well developed. They have people that are hired just for that role, and that does make it easier for the researchers. But I think there's a lot of capacity within the Bering Strait region that we are taking advantage of and that we need to utilize. I'm particularly pleased with with our connections with QUERC and the other Indigenous organizations out there. And actually, I got to say that the Northwest Community Campus has just been wonderful for us over the years. So thank you to Gay and for everybody at the campus. You've been great,
including Alaska Sea Grant, which is
including Sea Grant.
There you go. All right, just we're getting that in. All right. Well, we've gone through what the questions are in the chat. Does anyone have questions straight up for Larry? And remember, callers, you can Budinsky anytime. All right. Well, given that,
I'd like to say one last thing. So
sure.
I work for you, so I am in the White House, but I'm your man in the White House. So we are trying to do our best for Alaskans, and so contact me if you need something, if you have something that we can do. We're doing our best to resolve some of these challenges. So
can you put your, thank you very much for that. Can you put your email in the chat box that you want people to write to you? And I can also give that to any of the callers who might want to get in touch with you. And I put the Denali Commission's email address up there as well. And it sounds like that's somebody that we all need to maybe get together and hit up if they've got money to make infrastructure improvements regarding communications. Whoosh, let's do it. Or everybody do it.
Hang on one second.
You're getting some nice kudos from Rick and Larry or Dean. Go ahead, caller.
This is Robert again from Diamede. I do have another question here concerning the traffic throughout the region and throughout the Arctic or so. How well or what's the capacity of coming to and fro where each vessel is? By satellite, by radar and stuff, and do we have a limit on how much we can bring up there due to the fact, people subside and live along the coast and stuff. And I'm sure they too may have concerns, like I too have concerns. I face the west. I never face the east. Our islands facing the west, our villages towards the west. We can't see the back of our island. Also, like I said, it's always good to have good communication. And I, for sure, and there's some people I'm sure that are concerned, how much traffic are we going to abide by or so, or how much can we take? And is there going to be a big concern amongst the people that are dwelling along the coast there? Thank you.
Yeah, legitimate question. I don't have a good answer for you. How much can we take? That's a research question for certain. You look at some of the other straits around the globe, and there's been tremendous traffic in there, and it's relatively uncontrolled, and so it is an international waterway, so it's that's a huge problem.
Yes, by learning by these problems that's amongst the world. So through the traffic and stuff, I'm sure that's a big concern. Due to the fact we've been living here for thousands and thousands of years or so, and living our way of life. Our groceries come from the sea and land, or so we subsist. So that's just one of the concerns I'm thinking of. It will, for sure, in the future, it will impact us, and not only us, the human race, the animals too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, this is Lucy. I just want to thank Larry for taking time to this. I have one last question. The plan for the Arctic, the federal plan for the Arctic, is not you mentioned 10 years, so it has nothing to do with who's in the president. Who's the president? The plan is that it's going to go forward regardless. Is that true?
So yes, yes and no. The administration, a new administration can come in and change some aspects. So the National Strategy for the Arctic Region, the NSAR, that's a 10-year plan. The Arctic Research Plan, the U.S. Federal Arctic Research Plan, that's a 5-year Arctic Research Plan, and so it will be a new plan will be developed and under the in 2026, depending on, well, it doesn't matter. In 2026, a new plan will be developed, and the administration in control then does have an influence on the priorities of that plan. That is true. But what we're doing, we're actually trying to make this plan resilient, in that, so I mentioned there are 90 deliverables in this plan, and those deliverables are spread across 18 agencies and across 3,500 researchers. And so there's such a large mass of effort going into this that it's going to be hard to stop it. We've got a lot of momentum going.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
I would appreciate a copy or a place where I can access the PowerPoint presentation.
So thank you, Lucy. That came up with some internal chats I was getting as well. So this was being recorded and will be on YouTube, just like all the rest. And you can get them either on YouTube, this recording, or on the UAF Straight Science website, which has a list of all the former, I think we're up to like 90 presentations with YouTube. So I'll make sure you get the link when it's up. It takes a couple days to get it up and running.
Thank you.
You bet. And I guess I would just like to say that, hearing from the callers, one thing that comes up is when the question of how many ships and what to expect, that kind of information, that forecasting is really important to everybody in this region, because the residents are having to deal every day, and the animals are having to deal every day and figure out this new world we find ourselves in. And it really is a new world. And it sounds like it's going to get even more. So know that communications are super important for letting people give the ability to sort of know when to zig and zag when they have to keep things going right. And I was just in a North Pacific Fisheries Management Council meeting, and they were saying, just the fact that NOAA Race Division had done a small tagging project with Savunga, native village of Savunga, working together with three fish, they just rewrote everything they know about Pacific cod movements. So, wow, what an advantage after all these years of research to come and start working with the people of the region, and they learn a whole new way of thinking. So I encourage, that sort of integration and open-mindedness, and you'd be amazed, I think, how science will, what they'll learn in this region to collaboratively, anyway, as we move forward. So with that, you got lots of good kudos in the chat. And Austin writes, thanks again, Larry. We recently had an IPCC, which I don't know what that stands for, analysis with rather dire predictions and aggressive recommendations for mitigating climate change. We haven't stopped GHGs, again, sorry, I can't translate this, Austin, at all. Won't the next IPCC analysis be even more dire? Oh, thank you. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Greenhouse gases. Thank you, Austin.
And Austin is correct, and it is terribly worrisome. There's actually been a lot of discussion recently with respect to, mitigating solar to try and stop climate warming, but that doesn't do anything to stop the greenhouse gas emissions, and still those emissions affect ocean acidification, and, we've really got to mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases if we're going to try and control the warming climate. So Austin is correct. It worries me too. Just gets worse and worse.
Well, thanks for the heads up, Austin. And Now you got me nervous, Mr. Hinzman, honestly. There is a comment that came in on my cell phone, and that had to do with I believe it's the avian influenza. So know that we have also these zoonotic. So zoonotic means diseases that people can catch. These new novel zoonotic diseases in the region. And I think this immediately gets at not only wildlife conservation and food security issues, but straight up human health. And so we were wondering, hopefully we will see this somehow, these agencies that are authorized federally to manage and do research on the marine resources in the region that are definitely food that people rely on, especially as you just keep on going up the coast. Hopefully we'll be seeing some kind of coordinated response to get at better understanding the breadth, scope, and what's happening to these animals and to our safety, our human safety as well. So I guess that was a comment that was brought in from the cell phone.
Okay, and with that, those are both the community health and also the die-offs of seabirds that we've been seeing. Those are both concerns that are being addressed in the implementation plan of the. So we are directing efforts towards those goals.
Wonderful, and I hope that you reach out to, or whoever. I don't think you're in the weeds there, but you're up in the higher level. But I hope that when those go forward, that they are totally making a coordinated effort to integrate, which is what it sounds like you're hoping to do. Wonderful.
Yep, absolutely.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks for putting the smiley face on the end of your comment, Austin, because it makes me feel a little better. All right. With that, I guess we should shut her down if no one has any other questions. Looks like the callers are still on. So here's your chance. I'm going to see. Looks like you got muted again. If there's no other questions coming in from the coast, next, I'm going to ask Larry if you can just stay on for a couple of minutes once we shut down. That would be wonderful. And next week on the 15th, Straight Science is all over the place this month, but we're going to have it on Wednesday, the 15th. And that is Amy Hendricks. She's with the Sea Ice for Walrus Outlook program, and she's going to be giving us an update on her review of that program and how that program works and why it's so good for giving information about sea ice, walruses, and other things. So we're looking forward to her presentation, and that'll be this coming Wednesday, April 15th at 6:30 at night. With that, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you so much, Larry. Whew,
Thanks, everybody. Thanks all. Thanks, Kate.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.